The rain on Inishbofin wasn't like other rain. It was a horizontal, spiteful thing, a dampness that didn't so much fall as invade, seeping through wool, skin, and bone to settle in the very soul. For American historian Dr. Alana Byrne, it was the first and most persistent ghost of her ancestral home. She had come to the island, a wind-scoured speck of rock and turf off the coast of Connemara, chasing a different kind of ghost. Her great-grandfather, Seamus O'Brien, had vanished from this place a century ago, not at sea like so many, but from his own hearth. The family story, whispered over generations in Boston, was that the Daoine Sídhe, the good people, the faeries, had taken him for some forgotten insult. Alana, a woman who built her life on carbon dating and primary sources, was here to debunk the myth. She sought the prosaic truth: a murder, an accident, a secret emigration. She'd rented a crumbling cottage on the western fringe of the island, a place called Gort Nag Sinam, the Field of Bones. The name, she'd been assured by the stoic landlord, Mr. O'Malley, was just an old name. "Sure, all the names here are old," he'd said, his eyes avoiding hers. "Pay them no mind." The cottage was a low, dark structure, its stone walls 2 feet thick, its windows small and mean against the Atlantic gales. It smelled of peat smoke, damp earth, and a profound, centuries-old silence. It was perfect for her research. Her first few days were spent in the island's tiny pub, tie fading, nursing pints of stout and trying to coax stories from the locals. They were a closed-mouth lot, polite but distant. They confirmed the legend of Seamus O'Brien, a proud man, a fine fisherman, who'd laughed at the old ways. He'd mended his nets on a side mound, they said. He'd cut down a lone hawthorn, a seach geel, for a new roof beam. And one night, during a fierce storm, a light was seen dancing over the cliffs near his home. When his wife rose the next morning, he was gone. The fire was dead, his pipe still warm on the hearthstone. A will-o'-the-wisp, Alana had said to old Finity, the publican, trying to keep her tone light. Marsh gas, surely. Finity had just wiped a glass with a slow, deliberate hand. Is it? The gas, does it sing, now? Does it call your name in a voice you'd know from the cradle? The conversation had ended there. Frustrated, Alana retreated to the cottage, surrounding herself with her laptop, digital recorders, and copies of the few letters Seamus had sent to his brother in America before his disappearance. The language was poetic, melancholic. He wrote of the island's beauty with the heart of a lover, but also of its whispering stones and the music that comes from under the hill. He mentioned a place he called the Listening Cliff, where he said you could sometimes hear the sea singing songs from 1,000 years ago. It was on her 5th night, as a gale howled around the cottage like a banshee, that the lights first appeared. She was transcribing a particularly cryptic letter when a flicker of greenish light danced at the edge of her vision through the small window. She looked up, her heart giving a little jump. It was gone. She returned to her work, blaming I's train. A moment later, it was back, a soft, bobbing luminescence, moving with an intelligent, skipping rhythm just beyond the stone wall that bordered the Field of Bones. It was beautiful. The thought came unbidden, a cold trickle in her mind. It was beautiful. It wasn't the harsh white of electric light, but a living, organic glow, the color of foxfire and deep-sea things. It pulsed gently, invitingly. Against every rational instinct, she felt a pull to go to it, to see it up close. She shook her head, hard. Marsh gas, she whispered to the empty cottage, her voice swallowed by the storm. Phosphorescence. A trick of the storm. She forced herself to go to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. The wind screamed, and in its pauses, she imagined she heard something else, a high, thin, melodic piping that was definitely not the wind. The next morning, the storm had blown itself out, leaving a world scrubbed clean and glittering. Alana, armed with a GPS and a determination to prove her sanity, went to investigate the area where she'd seen the light. The ground was soft and boggy, but there were no methane vents, no unusual fungi. What she did find, nestled in a clump of heather, was a small, smooth stone, perfectly round and white as milk. It was warm to the touch, though the morning was chill. It felt intentional, like a dropped token. She pocketed it, a trophy of her rationality. That evening, she met with the island's oldest resident, 90-year-old Bridie Flaherty, who lived in a spotless cottage smelling of baking soda and lavender. Bridie had sharp, black eyes that missed nothing. "You're the Yank," she said, not as a question. "The one asking after Seamus O'Brien." "I am. He was my great-grandfather." Bridie nodded slowly, her wrinkled face a map of the island itself. "Aye. He was a fine man. Stubborn. The good people don't care for stubbornness, unless it's their own." "The good people," Alana repeated, trying to keep the skepticism from her voice. "What do they want? Why take people?" Bridie's eyes gleamed. "Who says they take? Some go willingly. For the music. For the beauty. For a love they can't find in this world." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They are not little winged things from a child's book, girl. They are the old ones. The other crowd. They were here before the first stone of Newgrange was laid. This is their land, and we are guests. And guests must mind their manners." "What manners?" "Don't travel the old paths after dark. Don't take what isn't yours. Don't answer a voice you know cannot be there. And never, ever follow the lights." Her gaze fell to Alana's jacket pocket. "And if you find a gift, it's best to leave it be. A gift demands a gift in return." Alana felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp. She hadn't mentioned the stone. Leaving Bridie's, the island felt different. The low, hummocky hills no longer seemed like natural formations, but like the buried roofs of vast, subterranean halls. The silence was no longer empty, but watchful. The stone in her pocket felt heavy, a secret weight. That night, the lights returned. Not one, but 3 of them, weaving and dancing in a complex pattern over the field of bones. The piping music was clearer now, a wild, atonal melody that made her blood thrill. It was music that promised forgotten joys, ancient memories, a release from the tedious, rational world. She stood at her door, her hand on the latch. It would be so easy to just look, to get a closer shot with her phone, to prove it was just bioluminescence. Never, ever follow the lights. She slammed the bolt home and retreated to the back of the cottage, pulling a blanket over her head. But she could still hear the music, seeping through the stone, worming into her dreams. The next day, she decided to find the listening cliff from Seamus's letters. Using his vague descriptions and her own topographic maps, she hiked to the westernmost edge of the island, where the cliffs fell away 200 feet to a seething, white-frothed cauldron of ocean. It was a place of terrifying grandeur. The wind whipped her hair, and the crash of the waves was a physical vibration in the rock. She found a flat stone shelf, sheltered from the worst of the wind, and sat, feeling foolish. Listening for what? At first, there was only the roar of the sea and the cry of gulls. But as she attuned her ears, she began to pick out patterns. The wind, whistling through a fissure in the cliff, created a low, resonant drone. The waves, crashing into a sea cave below, produced a percussive, rhythmic boom. Together, they formed a crude, powerful symphony. And then, she heard it. Not with her ears, but inside her head. A voice, woven into the natural music. It was her great-grandfather's voice, not from the old crackling recordings she'd heard, but young and vibrant, filled with a desperate love. A storm Croy, they are so beautiful, their city under the hill. The light is not like sun, it is a liquid thing. The music, Alana, the music, it knows your true name. She jerked back, scrambling away from the cliff edge, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was her mind playing tricks. Suggestion, pareidolia. She was a historian, not a ghost hunter. She was tired, stressed, susceptible. But the voice had felt so real. And it had used her name. She fled back to the cottage, her rational world cracking at the seams. That night, she drank a half bottle of whiskey to silence the memory and fell into a troubled sleep. She was woken by a sound at her door. Not a knock. A scratching. Like a branch, or long, thin fingers. She sat up in bed, the whiskey-fueled fog evaporating into pure adrenaline. The room was pitch black. The wind had died down, and the silence was absolute. The scratching came again. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Then, a voice. Her great-grandfather's voice, exactly as she remembered it from the family's one cherished recording. Alana, Aline, let me in. It's cold out here. I've come home. Her blood turned to ice. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Alana, the voice pleaded, so full of warmth and familiar love it made her chest ache. I've been lost for so long. Let me in, my girl. Let me see you. Tears streamed down her face. It was him. It had to be. A miracle. 100-year mystery solved. All she had to do was open the door. Her hand was on the cold iron of the door latch when Bridie's words echoed in her mind, cold and clear as spring water. Don't answer a voice you know cannot be there. She snatched her hand back as if burned. The voice outside changed. The warmth bled out of it, replaced by a petulant, ancient coldness. You have what is ours, it hissed, no longer pretending to be human. The gate is open. The debt must be paid. The scratching intensified, becoming a frantic scrabbling. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Alana spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner, a kitchen knife in her hand, watching the door. The first grey light of dawn felt like a pardon. When she finally mustered the courage to look outside, there was nothing there. No footprints in the soft mud, no broken branches. Only the white stone, which she had left on the doorstep the day before, was gone. In its place was a small, dead seabird, its neck neatly broken. It was a message. A threat. A promise. She packed her bags in a frenzy. This was no longer academic. This was madness, or it was real, and she wanted no part of either. She would take the afternoon ferry back to the mainland and never think of Inishbofin again. Mr. O'Malley drove her to the pier in his old van, his silence heavier than usual. As they approached the small harbour, a thick, white fog began to roll in from the sea, swallowing the world with an unnerving speed. "You'll not be going anywhere today, girl," O'Malley said, his voice grim. "That's a CEO Dryocta. A fairy fog. The ferry won't run in this." Panic clawed at her throat. She was trapped. Back at the cottage, the atmosphere had shifted. The watchful silence was now openly hostile. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, more substantive. That night, the lights came not as a distant lure, but as a siege. Dozens of them, bobbing and weaving right outside her windows, their greenish glow painting the interior of the cottage in shifting, sickly hues. The piping music was a deafening, maddening shriek, promising not beauty now, but an eternity of dancing madness. She barricaded the door, shoved rags in the cracks of the windows, but the light and the sound seeped through. They were in the room with her. "You have what is ours." What did she have? The research, the letters, and then she knew. It wasn't the stone, it was the blood. Seamus O'Brien had gone willingly, but he had left something behind, a bloodline, a connection. And she, the skeptical historian, had followed that connection right to their doorstep. By seeking him, she had drawn their attention. By listening, she had acknowledged them. And by refusing their call, she had insulted them. A debt must be paid. The door began to rattle on its hinges, not from wind, but from a series of sharp, powerful blows. The old, solid wood began to splinter. Alana backed into the hearth, the cold, ancient stones at her back. There was nowhere to run. With a final, sickening crack, the door burst inward. It wasn't a monster that stood there. It was worse. It was a man of light and shadow, tall and impossibly graceful. His features were achingly beautiful, but cold and alien, like a statue brought to life. His eyes held no warmth, only the ancient, chilling green of the dancing lights. He was clad in robes that seemed woven from moss and twilight. Behind him, the field of bones was alive with a swirling host of similar figures, their movements a hypnotic, terrifying dance. "The gate is open, daughter of O'Brien," the being said, its voice the sound of the wind through the fissure in the listening cliff. "He waits for you. He misses his blood." "No," Alana whispered, her voice breaking. "You sought him. You called to him. And we have answered." It extended a long, slender hand that seemed to be made of polished birch and moonlight. "Come. Your scholarship is over. It is time to learn the true history of your blood." The piping music swelled, filling her mind, dissolving her will. The rational world, the world of carbon dating and primary sources, crumbled to dust. This was the primary source. This was the truth at the heart of all the legends. She thought of Seamus's voice, so full of love for this terrible beauty. She felt the same pull, a dreadful, irresistible yearning. Slowly, against every screaming instinct of self-preservation, Alana Byrne reached out and took the cold, beautiful hand. The touch was like ice and electricity. The world of the cottage, the island, the 21st century, simply dissolved into a roaring, green-tinted whirlwind. She felt herself pulled, not through space, but through the very substance of the world, down into the damp earth, into the heart of the hill. When her senses returned, she was in a vast, cavernous hall. The light came from the walls themselves, a throbbing, liquid emanation. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil, night-blooming flowers, and ozone. Figures moved in the half-light, dancing to the ceaseless, maddening pipe music. They were beautiful and hollow-eyed, humans and other intertwined, all moving to the same ancient rhythm. And then she saw him. A man, dressed in the rough homespun of a century past, his face a older, weathered version of the photograph in her locket. Seamus O'Brien. He was dancing, a slow, graceful figure in the endless reel, but his eyes were fixed on her. They were not filled with joy, but with an infinite, silent sorrow. A warning. He had not been taken to paradise. He had been taken to serve, to populate their timeless, soulless court. And now, so had she. Alana tried to scream, but the music filled her mouth, her lungs, her mind. Her body, no longer her own, began to move, her feet finding the steps of the dance as if she had known them all her life. The weight of centuries began to press down on her, the relentless, beautiful horror of eternity. Back in the world above, the fog lifted by midday. Mr. O'Malley, feeling a sense of duty, went to check on the American woman. He found the cottage door shattered, the interior in disarray. Her luggage was there, her laptop open on the table, her clothes strewn about. But of a